When I finished school, more like high school, yet you know it would be, wanted to be an engineer. And so I applied for electrical electronics engineering in University of Benin. And so they had to cut it down and I got transferred to industrial physics. And being in industrial physics sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities of how science and how audio basically is an embodiment from science. It's more related to science. And I already had interest in audio engineering and music production alongside electronics engineering before I entered school. And so getting into university, sort of reshaping what I wanted to do. Yeah, I would be an independent entrepreneur. I think it's way better that way. And most of the things I would need to start this business is regarding getting equipment, getting gears and stuff. More, it's both ways, getting the education and getting the equipment. And with the advent of the internet, it's quite easy to, educate yourself online in this regard. And so I would say a major challenge is getting the equipment because they could be quite expensive from this side of the world. So
Destiny, you're already making money with music, right?
yeah. Making money with music. Well, I stay in a student community. That's where I live. I live close to school. And most times you have a lot of young persons who would want to go into the music business and they want to start out as artists, as musicians and stuff. And so I offer the services of being their producer or an audio expert for their projects. I actually have tried working for persons before in other sectors that's quite different from music production. And I sort of had quite understood how the whole, work environment is. And it's not so helpful for me as a person. If I have a 9 to 5, I prefer working like opening my own business than working for someone because really a 9 to 5 might not necessarily give me the time to achieve that achieve the level of growth I would want to, because after spending a lot of time working, I would have to use my nights to produce, and production takes quite a lot of time. For saving, yeah, I have already started that. There are some online saving platforms like Piggyvest and Crowd Cowrywise. Yeah. So I make use of Piggyvest to have financial goals for which I save up for this business, and which is one way I plan to fund the business. And regarding getting experience and stuff, well, I try to see how I can speak with persons that have already started this business, probably people I take as mentors, people I respect in the industry, and have sort of one-on-one mentorship with them. And yes, I probably might make one or two mistakes, but I think I would really love to learn the ropes as I proceed or I progress.
So just wondering, anything that you heard, does that connect the dots with the research findings?
One image I get from the way you're talking about your business, Destiny, is you must use your mobile phone as almost your office in the pocket. It supports all your messaging. What sort of networks do you have?
Currently, I haven't found a network that helps in lending money and getting money from maybe mentors or big persons. There isn't currently a network for that. I think most of the time it's just as a result of goodwill. that
Yeah.
you get funds from someone who you respect. And for saving, which you talked about, it's an app on my phone. That's
Right.
PiggyVest. So it's sort of linked to my bank account. So for on a regular base, for which I set, I can decide on how much I want to save per week or per month, or based on
Cool.
how I decide to set it up. And then for communicating with clients, most of my clients are on WhatsApp. And so I get to chat with them constantly on WhatsApp. And sometimes we also send emails through Gmail.
Data scientists are looking at people like you through numbers and thinking, my goodness, the incredible complexity with the people manage to build up to make money do what they want.
Yeah,
Messaging through WhatsApp, formalizing through email, adding an app to a savings account. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm always trying to look for something that can save time for me. And that's what this apps offers. So if I get a transfer, for instance, on to my account with my phone, I can decide to cut out of it and save in the piggy bank. And when I'm in need of it later on, I can decide to bring it back to the bank account and make use of it from there. So that's the way it works for me. Because of COVID has made us to social distance from each other. And so it's quite hard currently because first thing, everyone is scared of coming outside and coming out of their house and stuff. And so because of that, there's been quite a drop in the clients.
The thing I found fascinating hearing Destiny talk was it shows was in all three strands of our data, that he's clearly multi-skilled. He's clearly multifaceted in the way he engages with the system. So he chose to take an app to feed his bank account because the app gave him a better interface. But also, the app fits in with his main means of transaction, which is mobile money. And I can see this in the macro data. One of the really interesting things on this is that if you're thinking about a shock like COVID, and what's going to get us through a crisis like that? It's going to be adaptivity and resilience. He's clearly feeling the shock. He said his income levels are down, but he hasn't stopped transacting. He's still doing some business. He's still moving some money. He's not getting as much money as he wants into his savings account. But those mechanisms that he's working with are still functioning. And I think they will bounce back very quickly, as long as they keep working from our side, from the formal financial service sector side. So we better keep those systems working, and we actually better make the interfaces run more smoothly. So that's a big lesson for me from COVID, that the very things that we talk about in the research, which was about how young people, particularly very young adults like mid-teen youth, were beginning to put together elements of the digital financial services package in ways that work for them.
I just want to have a word on the terminology. So we're talking about mid-teens, youth, and young adults. I think we should explain that because it makes a difference. which age groups we're talking about. Mid-teens, we're referring to the 15 to 70 years old. Then youth, the next age group, 18 to 24, and what we call young adults, we're referring to the 25 to 30 years old.
If you listen to him talking about his work and how he wanted to form a business, you realize that he's talking to a lot of different people. He has an extensive network of support that he's building for himself. He's got people who have been in the business for a while and he can turn to for mentorship. You know, he's developing, customer relations through WhatsApp, and then, as I think someone pointed out, formalizing it through email. And that speaks to something in the data which we saw, which is the amount of money that is being transferred in and out of the hands of all of the segments, in terms of just simply transfers of money, not for a service provider or anything else, but sort of as mutual support systems. There are lots of extra family networks, friends, neighbors who are part of these transfers. And in terms of resilience in the face of COVID-19, there's a potential for that to be disrupted, because potentially those networks get severed if there's no face-to-face. But with digital financial services and the sort of things Steve was talking about, those networks of mutual support could continue. We don't have data on that.
So here we have a slide on who has mobile phone, and a simple one. That's only about 25%, almost the same for men and women. Women are left, men are on the right. So the green part is yes. Basically, almost anybody has either a smartphone or a simple phone. And when you look at women and men, the spread is almost the same. However, when you look at access to smartphone, there's a very strong difference between, according to the PPI score. So the people who are poorer in terms of PPI score have far less access to this, to the smartphone devices. The poorer people are, the less likely they are to use digital financial services. They feel uncomfortable and mistrusting a lot. And I can't imagine that COVID is solving that trust now very quickly. And it's not true that young people are a lot more digital savvy than older ones. When we look at a cross section of people in any study we've done, we see actually that the age group 35 to 45 is more likely to use mobile money and digital finance, also because of the wealth situation. So the more vulnerable you are, the poorer you are, the less likely you are to use all those tools.
Are there public-private partnerships that should be fostered to support training, to enable people, to make better use of digital services, to better understand the risks of building their own business and so on?
Two things from studies on how financial education works. One is that there is a lot of evidence that in-school financial education works well with youth. So to the extent that youth are in school, there should be promotion of financial education in schools. There is a measured change in knowledge of high school attendees. And in the case of a randomized control trial in Brazil, there was a a measured change in the behavior, not only of the youth who experience the in-school financial education, but also of their parents. So to the extent that youth are in school, that's where they can get their financial education. And if financial service providers want to be part of that, they can support efforts to develop curricula that can be delivered in the schools. In terms of once they're out of school, then the game changes completely. Their concerns are less about learning for knowledge accumulation, and it's more about getting by. How do I navigate my way through the world? And in that regard, financial service providers can play a role in the sense that there are touch points between youth and financial service providers where the financial service provider can provide information to young people. The problem with that is often financial service providers are very tempted to just simply market to their clients and not really seek to empower them. So there's a problem with that. There needs to be a way in which they have quick access to the information as and when they need it. And that's a continuous challenge. But again, peer-to-peer teaching, learning can help with that because you can call your friend and ask for help. Or if there's a way to get online through a smartphone, app-based learning can help as well.
Segmentation was so important for us during this research because it really helped us understand the different phases that young people go through as they grow up and what their specific needs and wants were at that time. What we learned in the research was that young women didn't necessarily expect to work their full adult lives. So when they did have work, as a young person, they were it was supposed to be short term, and they were sort of building their finances and structures so that they at some point didn't have to work anymore. And young men, contrary to this, were very specific on building their finances and building their savings and building their businesses so that they could take better care of their families later on. And it will be interesting to see what COVID-19 will have done for this in terms of the gender roles and the financial behaviors linked to gender roles. Working with young people throughout the research, we already saw quite a lot of young women who were saying, oh, but we want to continue working and we're okay to not get married for a while if that means that we can continue working. And that then obviously also has implications for the savings and the spendings behavior of them as well as they grow older. But a shift in gender, financial inclusion and social norms because of COVID-19 and the changing of realities and the lockdown and relations might be in the making. The social norms, there's sort of rules that everybody takes for granted within society and everybody understands them and doesn't question them. For example, and young women, we all have young women and young men have grown up to learn all of these social norms and what they mean in their contexts. But all of this is now being questioned in times of COVID-19, and I wonder what the new normal is and how that relates to financial behaviors in the long term. So not only in the short term, but also what that might mean for the long term. So an interesting hypothesis might be that with the lockdown and with people being forced to go back home and being with their families for a long time, I wonder what the effects of intra-financial household flows would be from COVID.
I come in there with a product that we have got in the sister program, Savings at the Frontier, from one of the WSBI members, which is a self-forming wallet clustering product. So in effect, it works for people who already have mobile money. And the partner, TPB Bank PLC in Tanzania, managed to negotiate with the biggest mobile network operator a deal that essentially anything that was wallet to the clustered family account was free. Any movement, in effect, within the closed user group of the family is free. COVID has shown that we can massively change, within days if the threat is big enough. But it's not easy.
Yeah, what the COVID-19, what the pandemic has shown us is that we're all very vulnerable, and so is the structure that we believe is not vulnerable at all. It is in fact actually ready to crumble very quickly. But social norms aren't short-term. They're very much long-term, and they're very much embedded in the structure that exists. And so in society, so what we're seeing is that actual financial behaviors are linked to social norms. They're not actually a social norm in themselves. So it's about understanding what COVID does to the situation, the social situation right now, and how that might affect long-term, maybe different social norms. Or change social norms in that sense. We won't, I don't think that COVID lockdown and the COVID measures has been going on for long enough to fundamentally change social norms, but I do believe and think and hypothesize that they might have affected social norms in some way. When you look at why it's necessary to even understand social norms for or by financial service providers, it's really to understand the specific needs and the specific needs and wants from the different groups and age segments that exist within a country, and see, in very general terms, of course, see how they behave and how best they can support their growth and sort of help them navigate the realities of coming of age. And of course that's different for young men and young women, and of course that's going to be different for mid-teens, youth, and young adults, because they all are in different stages of their lives and therefore need different things.
So looking at our diaries data, we know that there's a two-way flow between parents and children in terms of transfers. And when the children, the youth, the young adults work, they often give money to their parents. Often it's the mother they give money to. More likely to do that. And so that was in pre-COVID times. It varied depending on which country you're in, although our sample size is not big enough to say that these country variations are representative of what's going on in each context. We also saw children, these youth, young adults, working for their parents, giving them their time. So there's definitely a two-way street. One of the issues with COVID is it hits everyone at the same time. One of the ways in which families can manage money and cash flow is, sometimes a young adult may be able to work, sometimes a parent may be able to work, and there may be some offsetting cash flows where one supports the other when money is lacking. The second issue is around the idea of traveling home. So There might be mutual support networks across distance. A young person in the city, an older person at home, and money is transferred between the two. In a COVID situation, travel is more difficult, and so digital financial services and the easy, cheap transfer of money between family members becomes essential. And so, again, there is a role for financial service providers in enabling any sort of mutual support that can exist within a family to continue to exist remotely.
More vulnerable people will need a lot more support. And the solution for them in general is not to get support from the agent, which is for most of the others is the place to get information and training and explanations. And so more vulnerable people tend to use over the counter more, even in countries where that is not so common. And that means that they have to trust the agent even more, and that is a challenge. In several countries, digital finance is becoming cheaper. The agents are starting to lose money. Not only is their commission lower, but the volume of things going through the agent has really declined. And that person who is the go-to person for advice is falling away. It is an extra reason to work on a mechanism that there is somebody in the community who can be a coach, who can be a trusted advisor to help everybody to learn how to use digital finance themselves.
The next step for us is to be working on a toolkit. So people hopefully can look out for a data toolkit that's coming out of the research that we conducted. And that will hopefully be useful to financial service providers and above all to young people, because at the end of the day, what we want is to make sure that we enable young people to build healthy financial lives.